This already started, and most people didn't even notice. You're about to catch it before everyone else does. The universe doesn't send warnings, it builds patterns quietly, and only a few catch them early. The upcoming new moon on March 19th isn't just another moon, it's the opening move of something much bigger that doesn't fully reveal itself until April. Right now, while everything seems normal, a rare planetary pattern is already forming in the background. And here's what most people get wrong. They think the energy only hits when the alignment happens, but the real shift is starting now. Between this new moon and the April alignment, there's a narrow window, about 30 days, where everything becomes unusually responsive. It's not random that this window lands almost perfectly on a full 30-day cycle. That's a complete turn, a full phase. This is the part people miss, because while everyone is waiting for something big to happen in April, the ones who actually understand this pattern are already moving now, quietly making decisions, shifting direction, locking things in. And those decisions don't stay small. That's why some people will ride this alignment like it was made for them, and others will feel like everything is happening too fast, too suddenly, completely out of their control. Same alignment, completely different experience. And that's where you realize that this event is targeting people differently. This isn't something that hits everyone the same way, and that's where most people misunderstand what's happening. Patterns like this don't spread evenly. They land directly on people who are already standing at a turning point. If you've been sitting in a situation where you know something has to change, but you've been delaying the decision, this is where it starts to close in on you. Not aggressively, not dramatically, but in a way that becomes harder to ignore with each passing day. The option to wait and see begins to quietly disappear. On the other side, if you've been building something in private, an idea, a plan, a shift in direction, this is where it starts pushing outward. Not because you're suddenly ready, but because the timing starts forcing visibility. Things that were comfortable staying behind the scenes begin to surface in ways you didn't fully plan. And then there's the group in the middle, people who aren't stuck, but aren't fully moving either. This is where the pattern becomes very clear. It doesn't reward hesitation, it responds to movement, even if that movement isn't perfect. Clarity doesn't come to those who wait, it comes to those who move before they feel ready. This is why the same alignment will feel completely different depending on where someone stands right now. For some, it will feel like things are finally working in their favor. For others, it will feel like pressure is building out of nowhere, but it's not random. The new moon is where something gets planted, whether consciously or not. And by the time this alignment completes in April, that seed is no longer optional. It's been pushed into its first real test. Right now, one of the easiest mistakes to make is thinking that nothing is happening. Things may feel slow. Conversations might not be leading anywhere yet. Decisions might feel like they're still forming instead of landing. On the surface, it can look like a delay, like things just haven't picked up momentum. But this isn't delay, this is compression. Everything that's been building over time is being pulled into a tighter space, not spread out. It's the difference between something drifting forward slowly and something being held in place until it releases all at once. Think of it like pressure being applied, not to stop movement, but to concentrate it. Just because it's quiet doesn't mean it's empty. It usually means something is being prepared. The new moon is where that pressure reaches a peak. It's not loud, it's not chaotic, but it's dense. It's the point where everything that hasn't been decided yet starts narrowing into fewer and fewer options. And that's why it can feel strange, not overwhelming, not intense, but almost too still. because underneath that stillness, things are being positioned very precisely. By the time this releases into the alignment in April, it won't feel like something slowly developed. It will feel like everything moved at once. What feels like nothing right now is usually the part you can't undo later. And once that release happens, there's no going back to this stage where things were still flexible. Now, here's the part most people overlook, because it doesn't sound dramatic enough at first, but this is actually one of the most favorable windows of the entire year if you understand how to move inside it. From this new moon through to the alignment in April, something very specific happens. The distance between what you do and what comes back to you starts to shrink. Normally there's a delay. You put effort into something and it takes time before anything reflects back. But in this window, that gap tightens. Actions start echoing faster. Decisions start showing consequences sooner. Movement starts generating response without the usual lag, and that changes everything. Because when that gap closes, it becomes much easier to build momentum. Things that felt like you were pushing uphill suddenly start to carry themselves forward. Conversations that kept getting postponed start happening naturally. Opportunities that felt inactive begin to reappear without you forcing them. It's not that things become effortless, it's that effort starts working properly. Some periods reward patience. This one rewards movement. This is why this window matters so much. It's not just another phase where you reflect or wait for clarity. It's a phase where clarity comes through action. The more direct you are, the faster things respond. The more decisive you are, the more the environment around you adjusts to meet that decision. And for people who have already been working towards something, even quietly, this can feel like things finally clicking into place. Not because something new appeared out of nowhere, but because what was already in motion finally has the right conditions to move forward. And now, it's time for today's comment of the day. Be the traveler. It's okay to search the world trying to understand life. Like in The Alchemist, we journey far only to discover the treasure was within us all along. A lot of people feel like they're lost because they're still searching. But maybe the search itself is part of the path. Moving, exploring, questioning, all of that shapes you. And then one day, things circle back. Not because the journey was pointless, but because it showed you what you couldn't have seen otherwise. Sometimes you have to go far to finally understand what was already yours. Thank you for sharing this perspective. At the same time, this window isn't just opening doors. It's also revealing things that have been sitting under the surface for a long time, and it does it in a way that's hard to ignore. This isn't a test of how positive you can stay or how many intentions you can write down. It's much more direct than that. It's a test of whether the life you're currently living actually reflects what you say you want. Because this kind of alignment has a very specific effect. It removes the distance between what you think, what you say, and what you actually do. And when that gap disappears, everything becomes very clear very quickly. If you've been saying yes to things you don't really want, that tension becomes obvious. If you've been holding back on decisions you already know you need to make, that hesitation becomes uncomfortable. If you've been waiting for the right time or for permission that was never coming, that waiting starts to feel pointless. Not because something external is forcing you, but because internally it stops making sense to stay the same. This isn't about becoming something new, it's about stopping what was never true, and that's where the pressure comes from. Because once things become clear like that, you can't go back to not seeing it. You can't pretend you don't know what needs to change. You can't stay in the same patterns without feeling the disconnect more strongly than before. Clarity doesn't destroy your life, it removes your ability to lie to yourself about it. The people who face that directly move forward fast during this period. The people who resist it feel like something is pressing on them without knowing exactly why. Because this isn't about comfort. It's about alignment in the most literal sense. Your actions, your direction, and your reality starting to match each other whether you're ready or not. And once that process begins, it doesn't pause just because you hesitate. What sits between this new moon and the April alignment is not just time passing. It's a bridge, and the way you move across it determines what you arrive to on the other side. Most people treat periods like this as something passive. They wait, observe, think things through, and tell themselves they'll act when things become clearer. But this specific stretch doesn't respond well to waiting. It responds to direction. Even small, deliberate movements during this period start to carry more weight than they normally would, because this isn't neutral timing. This is what you could call a compounding window, where actions don't just sit where you place them. They build on each other faster, stack into momentum quicker, and start shaping outcomes before you even realize it. A single decision made now doesn't stay isolated. It connects to the next, and before long, you're no longer deciding step by step. You're being carried forward by what you already set in motion. Small moves in the right moment don't stay small. They multiply. That's what makes this bridge so important. It's not about doing everything at once or forcing major changes overnight. It's about being intentional with what you choose to move toward and what you choose to leave behind, because both carry forward with you. If you focus your energy on something that actually matters to you, you'll notice it starts gaining traction faster than expected. If you continue investing in things that you already know aren't aligned, that weight follows you just as quickly. This period doesn't judge what you choose. It amplifies it, and that's why it feels different. Because during most times, you can move without immediate consequence. You can delay, hesitate, or drift without it showing up right away. But during this bridge, things respond sooner. The feedback loop tightens. You start seeing the direction you're heading much earlier than usual, which gives you an advantage if you're paying attention. This is the rare moment where direction matters more than speed. You don't need to rush, but you do need to be clear. You don't need to have everything figured out, but you do need to stop moving in directions you already know aren't right. The bridge doesn't demand perfection, it demands alignment. And the reason this matters so much is because by the time the alignment in April arrives, you're not starting from zero. You're arriving with momentum already behind you. What you've built, chosen, or shifted during this period is already in motion, already shaping what comes next. When people talk about alignments like the one coming in April, they usually focus on the peak. They circle the date, they wait for it, and they treat it like that's when everything finally happens. But the truth is, by the time the alignment becomes visible, most of the important movement has already taken place, because this isn't two separate events. The new moon in March and the alignment in April are part of the same sequence, just at different stages. One begins the process, the other reveals what that process created. And if you only focus on the end, you miss the part where everything was actually set into motion. By April 18th to 23rd, things don't feel like they're beginning. They feel like they're arriving. Situations reach a point where they're harder to change. Momentum feels established. Outcomes start showing themselves in a way that feels more fixed than flexible. And for some people, that feels exciting. For others, it feels overwhelming. But in both cases, it didn't start in April. It started here. It started with this new moon, with this shift, with this moment where things were still adjustable, still flexible, still open to direction. This is where the path was shaped before it became visible. By the time something becomes obvious, it's already been decided, and that's why understanding the timing changes everything. Because instead of waiting for the event, you recognize the sequence. Instead of reacting to what happens later, you shape what happens before it does. And once you see it that way, this entire period stops feeling random. It starts feeling structured, intentional, and something you can actually move with instead of just observe, which is exactly what most people won't realize until it's already passed. One of the more subtle reactions to this kind of shift is not excitement or clarity, but resistance, and it doesn't always look obvious at first. It often shows up as people trying to hold on to things that, just days ago, already started losing their pull. You might notice it in yourself or in others. Something that used to feel important suddenly feels flat, disconnected, or harder to engage with, and instead of recognizing that as a signal, the instinct is to push harder, to try to bring the feeling back, to force the same level of interest, the same attachment, the same meaning. But here's where it becomes a problem. When something naturally begins to lose its pull during a period like this, it's not random. It's not you losing motivation or something breaking. It's usually because your position in relation to it has already shifted, even if you haven't fully accepted it yet. And trying to force yourself back into it doesn't restore what was there before. It creates friction. The moment you have to force something to feel right, it usually isn't anymore. This is why some people will feel unusually frustrated during this period without understanding why. They'll go back to things that once made sense, trying to reconnect with them, only to find that it doesn't land the same way. Conversations feel off. Environments feel slightly out of place. Interests that once held attention start feeling like effort. And instead of recognizing that as movement forward, they interpret it as something going wrong. So they double down. They re-engage harder. They try to rebuild something that has already shifted out of alignment with where they are now. But the more they push, the more resistance they feel, because the shift didn't just begin, it already happened. What this period does is remove the illusion that you can go back to how things felt before. It makes that gap more noticeable. It exposes where you've outgrown something, even if part of you still wants to stay there because it's familiar. Growth rarely feels like progress in the moment. It feels like losing interest in what used to define you. And that's why fighting it backfires. Not because you're being punished or blocked, but because you're trying to move against a direction that's already been set. The pattern has already started forming. The pull has already changed. The only thing left is whether you move with it or keep resisting it. The people who move with it experience this as clarity. The people who resist it experience this as frustration. Same shift, completely different outcome, and the difference isn't what's happening around you, it's whether you're willing to let what's already changing actually change. When people hear about an alignment happening in April, they imagine something sudden, like everything snapping into place all at once. But that's not how these patterns work. Nothing in the sky jumps from disorder to perfect alignment in a single moment. It approaches it gradually, step by step, like something tightening into position over time. And what we're in right now is not the alignment itself, but the phase where everything is leaning toward it. This is the part most people overlook because it doesn't look dramatic. There's no clear visual marker, no obvious signal that something significant is happening. But underneath that, the system is already adjusting, already organizing itself in a specific direction. It's almost like a rehearsal. Not a rehearsal in the sense that it might or might not happen, but in the sense that the movement is already being practiced before it reaches its final form. Each position, each shift, Each small adjustment is part of a sequence that is building towards something that becomes visible later, and that lean toward alignment carries meaning on its own, because even before everything locks into place, the direction is already set. The moment something starts leaning in one direction, the outcome has already begun forming. This is why this period feels so specific, even if it's hard to explain. And if you're still here, still watching, I truly appreciate that more than you think. What we talked about isn't something you have to chase or overthink. You don't need to rush, and you don't need to get everything perfect. This isn't about doing everything right. It's about being aware while things are still taking shape. Because right now, things are still flexible, still forming, still responding. And if you've made it this far, then you're already ahead of where most people will be when all of this becomes obvious. So take that with you and trust that what you do with this moment now will meet you again very soon in ways you'll recognize.